This show is produced by the Hartman Media Company. For more information and links to all our great podcasts, visit hartmanmedia.com.
Speakers, publishers, consultants, coaches, and info marketers unite. The Speaking of Wealth Show is your roadmap to success and significance. Learn the latest tools, technologies, and tactics to get more bookings, sell more products, and attract more clients. If you're looking to increase your direct response sales, create a big-time personal brand, and become the go-to guru, the Speaking of Wealth Show is for you. Here's your host, Jason Hartman.
It's my pleasure to welcome Brian Kurtz to the show. He is the author of Overdeliver, Build a Business for a Lifetime, Playing the Long Game in Direct Response Marketing. Brian, welcome. How are you?
I'm fine. Great to see you, Jason.
It's good to have you on, and you're coming to us from at least the former home of the famous Martha Stewart, Westport, Connecticut.
I am.
Talk about a personal brand, huh?
Yeah, she really built a brand.
Yeah, she sure did. You know, most people view direct response marketing, or maybe they don't view it this way, but they play it this way, I'll say, as the short game. And you believe in playing the long game, and so do I. I think it's much more profitable, economical, and just more ethical to play the long game. So I'm glad to see that. But, you know, most people view the direct response world as like this churn and burn, like just get people to buy something and then jump onto the next hot thing. Tell us about Overdeliver and the fundamental philosophy behind it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's interesting because playing the long game is the way to be. I mean, I think it's just a great way to go. But unfortunately, with, you know, people's cash flow crunches and what they have to do day to day and pay the bills, you tend, especially in internet marketing today, playing a short game and big hits right away is a faster way to cash.
Right.
So that's always been the lure. And of course, online marketing is so much cheaper than when I started in the 80s, which was direct mail, which was way more expensive.
Yeah.
And so I think that the key with Overdeliver is that just because your marketing is less expensive doesn't mean you have to be sloppy. Doesn't mean you have to just throw stuff out there. And I think that even if you're in a cash flow crunch and you're looking for the quick hit, you still can massage a list, you can still make love to a list, you can still do things to a list that you don't have to go in for the kill right away. And you can overdeliver with content and not necessarily go in for the sale right away. So that's kind of the broad view as it pertains to long-term, short-term.
Sure. What is original source? What do you mean by that?
Well, it's chapter 2 in my book. And what I mean by that is original source, like, for instance, if you're on Facebook today and you're doing a lookalike model, I think if you go back to the original source in direct marketing of the people that did models and did what we call regression models, not that you're going back to just go down memory lane and, you know, learn a few things. If you can go in deep to regression modeling and lookalike models the way we did it in the 80s when it was all direct mail, it was way more expensive, so you had to be much more targeted. I think that you then can go to your Facebook agency and ask different questions and apply it to the media today. And that's just one example.
Tell the listeners about regression modeling. What is that?
I don't want to go too deep on that because it gets really granular. But a regression model in direct mail is when you have like we'll say a universe that you can mail that's like 2 million names. And you go in with your offer to a certain number of names, like say 50,000 or 100,000, and you get the responses from those names. And then you have all the data on those names. These are your house names. You have all the data on those names. And then you go back out to the 2 million and take a look at the characteristics of the 50,000 of the names that responded and see how they relate to the total universe. And then you can put the names, the 2 million names, into deciles or demi-deciles, top 5% or top 10%. And you can actually predict what level you can mail to profitably. I can really go crazy on this.
Right, sure.
I think the difference is that in Facebook modeling, it's more a lookalike model where you have your audiences look alike the way that they are. And I think you'll segment a lot better if you understood regression modeling. That's just one example of an original source that you can use to create, an opportunity on the internet.
What else can people do to differentiate themselves with all the noise out there in the marketing world? I mean, consumers are rightfully skeptical, as they should be, because the world is just full of scams and half-truths and half-promises and all these things. How do you differentiate yourself?
I think the best way to differentiate, you can differentiate by, product and by things in your product that are unique to the product. But even if it's sort of a commodity, you can differentiate by the media. The idea of going into media that no one else is, or being the only one. That's a very, very important concept in marketing. Dan Kennedy told a story at one of my events where he's talked about, he goes to horse auctions because he rides horses. Mm-hmm. At the horse auctions, there's a pop-up jeweler. Mm-hmm. And so the pop-up jeweler is there. And why would the pop-up jeweler be there? Well, if the guy is buying a horse for $500,000, after he buys the horse, he can also go get a tennis bracelet for his wife. Mm-hmm. It's very simplistic, I know. It's a little chauvinist, I know, and you can probably reverse this with women.
Now, why would anybody think giving a woman a tennis bracelet is chauvinist? I mean, what kind of world do we live in?
No. I guess the chauvinist piece is like, is that most of the people are men, and then they're going to go buy a gift for their wife.
Right.
So,
but the reality is, most of the people there buying horses are men. So
that's right. And most of the people who would want jewelry are women.
Yeah, right. So this political correctness has just got us down this ridiculous
rabbit hole. I won't go there. I was just trying to be a little polite.
I get it.
I think that the concept is great because you've got a marketer he's the only one there, clearly. Yeah. I just think that's great. So that's a great way to differentiate, because the tennis bracelet is not a differentiator unless it's by some designer, and that could be a differentiator too. But the differentiator is where you are and that you're the only one. Mm-hmm. So that's a really interesting way to look at it. But I also think that, like in the supplement business or something like that, differentiating a fish oil is very difficult. But differentiating a multivitamin because you have an ingredient or something that sets you apart can really set you apart. And then the other thing I would add is that online marketers who are just email or just Facebook, or the most dangerous number in business is one. Mm-hmm. So you have to have multi-channels. And I think that using online and offline channels in selling the same product can really differentiate you, because if you can sell something online that's inexpensive and then come back with the ability to go either in direct mail, or you come back with, a big lumpy package or something like that, that differentiates you from your competition.
That's what Dan calls the shock and awe, right?
Yeah, shock and awe, right. So that's another way to differentiate, but you can't do that, really if you're only dealing in one channel or one specific medium. So I think multi-channel is probably the best way to differentiate. Yeah.
I think multi-channel approaches like that increase trust, because they show that you're a little more stable than just sending out emails, right?
Yeah, I think, the idea of with a real estate agent, for instance, most people will say that's a commodity on the surface, and you're sending out postcards and you're sending out, ways to sell your house. But the differentiator is when once you become a trusted advisor, as opposed to someone who sells houses, that makes the difference. And I think one of the things that, for instance, a real estate agent could do is develop content so you're not ready. You can go to a lot of people who aren't ready to sell their house yet because it's an episodic thing, but that you can go out there with content on a regular basis and get them into an email list, send them content, and then when they're ready to buy, you might be the first one on their mind. Yeah, so that's another way to go.
What kind of tools and software and vendors do you like to use, Brian?
My business is fairly simple. So, I use Infusionsoft and I use, for my email. But I think that a lot of the tools, I always say that in marketing, a la carte is the way to buy, not one-stop shopping. So, for instance, I never went to an agency for everything all at once. It would have been easy. But, for instance, the best copywriters are generally not in an agency because they can make a lot more money outside of an agency. So it's not a tool, but it's a resource of a copywriter. And if you're buying your copy all in one with everything else, I think it's a mistake.
How do you evaluate copywriters? I mean, how do you know who's good? How do you hire them? Where do you hire them?
Hard.
I mean, do you hire them on some of the platforms, the writing platforms, or the generic ones for freelancers, or what?
It's not foolproof, but what I did was, because I was very frustrated at this, because I'd always get emails on a regular basis from people saying, can you find me a good copywriter? Mm-hmm. Copywriters are not commodities. So
not the good
what
ones.
I used to do, not even close if you're getting a good copywriter. I mean, there are copywriters that say they can write for anything, but you and I both know that the best copywriters really found themselves in a niche first and then expanded. So they found a niche they were passionate in, and then they went wider once they went really deep. They went a mile deep before they went a mile wide. Mm-hmm. So I've worked with all the great copywriters over the last, 40 years, and I tried to come up with some characteristics that were present in all of those copywriters. I don't know if that's helpful to share those or not.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely.
Yeah. I think, because it's very important, because you're looking at I said it's the 7 characteristics of world-class copywriters. And if these were present in every one of the writers that I work with, chances are that you want to find these characteristics in the ones that you're looking for.
Go for it.
One is hunger. They have to be really hungry. They got to be voracious about going after 10,000 hours, that they did the work before they got to you. That's very important. 2 is insatiable curiosity. The best copywriters, and when I would interview a copywriter, if they weren't asking me questions about the product they were going to write for, or the lists that we mailed, or anything about that, I wouldn't usually go a second interview with them, because the curiosity, and most copywriters are great interviewers. So they know how to get the information out of you, because you, as the entrepreneur or the person who knows the product best, probably has the information in you, but you can't put it on paper. So you got to be a great interviewer.
Yep.
3 is what I call smarts, that I want to know who that copywriter is hanging around with, because all the best copywriters had people that they checked their copy with. They had either copy buddies or other great copywriters who they would exchange copy with, and they would critique each other's copy. And that's important, because while you can't write copy by committee, you need to check copy by committee.
Yeah,
so that's
point.
Very important. 4 is passion. That's the mile deep. Make sure you have incredible passion for that topic. And so that's one of the things when someone says, can you find me a good copywriter? The first thing I want to know is, what's your category? And I'd want to try to find somebody who's written in that category before throwing names at them. 5 would be the understanding direct marketing principles. Really important. In my first book, The Advertising Solution, we profiled 6 of the great copywriters of all time, copywriters and marketers of all time. And it was interesting that I had all these quotes from all of them, and every one of them actually talked about the list. Now, the list is the most important. They're the copywriters, but they knew that if the list was targeted, they knew that their copy would be much better, and it makes their job a lot easier.
Yeah.
In fact, if you have the wrong list, your copy is never going to work for that list.
Right.
So that's really important. But all kinds of direct marketing principles, from list, offer, lifetime value, all that. And so I think if you understand it and read all the books, and most copywriters, the best copywriters, have read all the marketing books.
Sure.
6 is humility. There's a thin line between arrogance and confidence.
Right.
And if you go to the arrogance place, some copywriters could get away with it because they were so good. But the best copywriters I know, they believed in their copy and they wanted you to test their copy exactly as they gave it to you, but they were not arrogant about it, and they were willing to test it. And 7 is how they share their success, how they show their work, and how they...
That's a perfect segue to my next question, which is, how do you pay them? A lot of that comes down to the deal you do. Do you give them a percentage? Do you pay them per word? Do you pay them per piece? Do you pay them per hour? What do you do?
So in the business I was in, because we were a large direct mail company that mailed a lot of names, we paid an upfront fee and a royalty against that fee. And there are all kinds of deals you can make on royalty. But I think if they're really good, and if they're as good as you think they are once you hire them, to not give them a percentage, to not give them a little bit of a stake in their work, I think is a mistake. Now, if you're just starting out, you probably can't afford to pay a royalty.
Well,
or
maybe they won't take it. They
might not.
Yeah.
But then again, you've got, if you're just starting out and you don't have any cash and you want to just pay them a royalty and they won't take any money up front, that's another way to go. I mean, the answer to your question is all of the above,
Right.
but it depends on what you're paying. And on the internet, you don't want to pay with direct mail. You could pay on pieces mailed, but if in the internet you want to pay on some small percentage of their lift, of their response, on the response lift that they get.
So even non-purchases.
Yes, it's usually on some formula of sales, less returns. And
I mean, how much do you need to pay them? Like, what would be your fee for the copy that you would pay? And then what would be the royalty amount? Like, this is all over the board. Nobody knows how to do those deals.
It is all
and a
over
lot
the
of it
board.
comes down to cutting the deal. It's just to incentivize them.
Yeah. So just to give you an idea, at the high end in direct mail, we used to pay about $30,000 for a full package, anywhere from $20,000 to $30,000.
Define full package.
For a full package, that would be a lot of copy. I mean, we're talking about, we did long direct mail. We had things called magalogs and bookalogs, which were,
Okay, that's a lot of copy. How many words? Do you know how many words is in all that?
Oh, God, I don't know.
Just curious.
But we never paid by the word. You paid by,
I got it.
yeah. And so,
okay, so you'd pay like $30,000, okay, for this big package.
And then you pay them an amount per piece mailed, which could be as much as 50 cents, which is $50 a thousand royalty. So that would be the highest end. Then on the lower end, you could have like someone who would charge you $15,000 and a 20 cent or $20 per thousand royalty. Mm-hmm. But then when the internet came along, you had all kinds of deals where you would pay, maybe 0.5% or 1% of sale, net sales or something like that, because you didn't have eyeballs. You can't pay on eyeballs, and you can't pay on number of names mailed. But it's all over the place. But I think the key thing on this is that it's not just lip service. You make the copywriter your partner, because if you structure a deal and it's too rich on either side, you want to leave yourself open to continue the deal, and therefore you might have to renegotiate.
Yeah, right.
And if you have that kind of relationship as opposed to an adversarial one, it's much, much better. And I was always somebody who always tried to renegotiate a deal either in my favor or not in my favor, depending on how the money played out. Yeah. The other thing about an incentive to write is that once they know they're getting a royalty, their incentive to keep the control and keep the package alive will incent them to write updated versions of that package at no additional cost. Mm-hmm. And so that's built in to a royalty arrangement. So that's a neat thing too. Mm-hmm. But you said you have so many different ways. I don't like paying by the word. I don't like paying by the project per se. But, as a first step with a writer that you don't know, you don't want to pay a royalty right away. So you pay them, a fee, and maybe pay them a bonus if they get the control, a one-time bonus equal to the upfront fee. That's a great way to start. And then the next time you go to a royalty rate. But there are so many ways to skin this. And I think you want to be creative and fair. I mean, that's the ultimate way to do it.
Absolutely. Good stuff. Well, Brian, any questions I didn't ask you, maybe something you want to share with our audience as you wrap it up?
I thought that the list part of the business, which is such an important factor, and in my book, I do the 40-40-20 rule, which is a direct marketing campaign is, 40% contingent on the list, 40% on the offer, and 20% on the creative. But now that we talked about copywriters so much, you would think that that doesn't mean that the copy is half as important as the list. Mm-hmm. But what it does say is that if you have the best copy in the world going to the wrong list, which I mentioned before, you've got zero response coming in. Mm-hmm. But if you have the best list and offer and the copy is mediocre, you'll make some sales. And that goes back playing the short game. If you've got a quick and down and dirty creative and the perfect list, you will make some money. Mm-hmm. But the key is that, it's sort of like the creative is the least important element until it's not. Mm-hmm. And what I mean by that is if you have your list and offer dialed in, then the creative is actually the area, the copy and creative is probably the number one element that can give you the big lifts in response. You've got your lists, they're going to do this. You've got your offer, and you can got it up and down a little bit also, but your copy can take it way up. And that's where you make the investment in copy, when you know the lists and you know the offers. So I think, that I learned this from the copywriters who didn't want to talk about their copy, but they wanted to talk about the list. So I wanted to just share that, which I think was a really important concept.
I think that is an important concept. Very good, very good. Well, the book is Overdeliver, and you've got some resources you want to share, right?
For two reasons. I had to develop a resource site that over-delivered. So I have and I have incredible bonuses at overdeliverbook.com, which are basically the other reason why not only did I want to over-deliver, but the second reason was I really wanted to honor my mentors, both living and dead. And so that was a really good way to do it. And I got carried away because I've got 11 bonuses there that are outstanding. I mean, I've got a course from Jay Abraham and 21 keynotes from him. I've got Dan Kennedy, a swipe book that he used for the Titans of Direct Response event that I did in 2014. I've got PDFs of classic books that are no longer available. I've got, Perry Marshall video that was a $2,500 event, and I have the video of that entire event digitally, and a lot of other things. So if you go to overdeliverbook.com, it gives you what to do. You go to Amazon or Barnes & Noble or Indie Books, you go buy the book, you come back to the site, you put your order number in, and you get an email with these incredible bonuses.
Excellent.
It's a really great package. I think the book is good. Felt we rushed through some stuff, but I think we got to some good concepts that are in the book, and I've got a lot more. And I think the key is that I don't look at the past as nostalgia. I look at the past as a way to look at the future. And so I'm a bridge between those two, and there aren't that many people out there that are. And so I think I'm in a unique position to be sharing the stuff that's in Overdeliver.
Good stuff. Yeah, no, there's a lot of new kids in the game, and they don't know how it used to be. So it's good to hear some perspective.
I want to make sure I'm not, grandpa saying, get off of my lawn and you whippersnappers don't know. That's not my game.
It's a blend of the two. That's the important part, a blend of the two.
I learned a ton from the young marketers.
Good stuff. Well, thanks for joining us, Brian.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you so much for listening. Please be sure to subscribe so that you don't miss any episodes. Be sure to check out the show's specific website and our general website, hartmanmedia.com, for appropriate disclaimers and terms of service. Remember that guest opinions are their own, and if you require specific legal or tax advice or advice in any other specialized area, please consult an appropriate professional. And we also very much appreciate you reviewing the show. Please go to iTunes or Stitcher Radio or whatever platform you're using and write a review for the show. We would very much appreciate that. And be sure to make it official and subscribe so you do not miss any episodes. We look forward to seeing you on the next episode.